Hi there, this is Britt Hoskins from the Career Development Center. I'm a career advisor, and today's topic is interviewing like a pro. So interviewing is really a challenging endeavor for really anybody, whether you feel like you're a natural at it or whether it just puts you into a cold sweat to even think about interviewing. It's something that the best thing you can do is prepare for it and really think through how you want to do this and how you want to approach it. So that's what we're going to talk through today. And no matter how good or bad you are at interviewing, you can always get a little bit better. So let's work on that. So I've divided this into sections to break up the different components. So before the interview, how do you prepare? One thing you can do is to research the organization. Get a good understanding of what they do, what they're about. The more knowledgeable you can be about the employer, the more appealing you're going to be as a candidate because you've done your homework. You understand who they are. So what new products have they released? What are their challenges? What news has come out? Have they issued a press release? Have they been, if you just do some searching through Google, have they been featured in a local newspaper? Understand what's going on with them. Then spend some time anticipating their questions. So in a past life, I worked in public relations, and if we had a big event coming up and we were going to be working with reporters and doing interviews, we would try to guess what their questions were going to be. So I would recommend the same approach for you. Create a Q&A for you of anticipated questions and work on answering them. There's no reason that an interview needs to be a total surprise. Spend some time thinking about what they're likely to ask you and get as ready as possible. And make sure to practice. So do a mock interview. It could be with a career advisor like myself. It could be at the career center. It could be just with a roommate or your mom or just doing an interview in front of your cat. Whatever helps you get ready. And I should mention that if you want to make an appointment with a career advisor to do a mock interview, then you can do that through Handshake. I'm actually the career advisor for the colleges of Agricultural Sciences, Forestry, and Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences, but there is a career advisor in each college that can help you with that kind of thing. And then also make sure to drive the route beforehand, know how to get where you're going. There's nothing more stressful than being on your way to an interview and getting lost or getting stuck in traffic. So plan extra time, figure out all that stuff in advance. So let's talk about types of questions you can prepare for. Resumes most commonly start with some sort of big picture question. Something like, tell me a little bit about yourself, or why do you think you'd be a good fit for this job? And I think that a lot of candidates waste this opportunity because they're not prepared to talk about themselves in kind of an open-ended way. So they might say something like, let's say it's a veterinary job. Well, I like animals, so I want to work here. Okay, that's a start. But what's much better is if you can come up with some sort of elevator pitch in your mind that you're going to use for this first question or something like it, where you can cover your top couple of experiences that you want to make sure that they know about you in the whole rest of the interview, because you don't know what's going to be asked or what they're going to focus on. So this is your chance to really summarize yourself really positively in that pitch. So for example, here's a sample elevator pitch. So someone says, why do you want to work at our company? Or why do you think you'd be a good fit for us? This is an example of a horticultural person answering that question. As a horticulture major, I have taken broad coursework in weed identification, pesticide application, and production systems. So I have a good understanding of the science behind your activities. Through my lab experience, I've honed skills in research sampling and remote sensing for irrigation. Outside the classroom, I've worked in the agricultural industry and gotten hands-on experience. For example, I completed a nursery internship with advanced ornamentals in St. Paul in field operations. I think my skills and personality would make me a great fit for this position. So maybe you mention your degree, maybe it's your top job, the top reason, or maybe it's the programming languages you know or the languages you speak. What are those top things you want them to know about you? And practice that as part of more of a pitch. So the second category of questions that you will typically encounter are the Telus Story questions. And these, I think, are the hardest ones to come up with on your feet. So my recommendation is to have 2 or 3 stories in your mind that you can flex to fit these different kinds of questions. Stories that involve you taking action to solve some sort of problem, you working with the team to solve some sort of problem, you facing some sort of challenge. So these questions will a lot of times take the form of, tell me about a time when you worked effectively with a team to accomplish a goal. Tell me about a problem or obstacle you faced. They're kind of behavioral interviewing questions, and they're notoriously hard to think of on your feet. So come up with some stories in advance. So for example, an interpersonal conflict. I had a student that was telling me the other day how she was a co-founder of a chess club. And she had a conflict with the other co-founder because she wanted to use their budget on advertising and he wanted to use the budget on new chessboards. And so the action she took was, I thought that we should sit down and talk about the benefits and the disadvantages, and we came up with a compromise. We would spend 75% of the budget on advertising to get new members, which would provide more budget for the future, and we would buy one nice chessboard for the club as kind of a showcase. So it's an example of working with people, coming up with a solution, and then if you can finish that with a positive benefit, as a result, membership increased by 50% the next term. So that's just an example of a story, but that kind of story can be used for a problem. It could be used for working with people. It can be used for a conflict. So you can see how the same story can work in several situations. When you're thinking about these stories, make sure that you're the superhero of your own story. You don't want to tell a story that's passive, that is really about what other people did and you were kind of watching or just kind of part of the team. You really want to be the person that says, hey, let's think of a better way. Or, oh, this has gone really wrong. How can we resolve this? Or what action can we take? So you want to be really active in your stories. And you also want to show the benefit of what you did for the company or for the team. As a result, we got the grant. You want a story that ends positively. As a result, we reduced errors. We used to have 100 errors in this product we were working on, and now we only had 3. Whatever it is, show that you've made a big impact. And never in interviews badmouth other people. Please don't do this. I've heard candidates do this, and you ask them about a conflict, and they start to say, "Well, she did this, and he did this, and she was just terrible." And maybe that person they're talking about was terrible, but we don't know that. So we, as the interviewer, are wondering if this person is a high drama person, and we're wondering if they can get along with people. Because when employers ask you stories about yourself, what they're really trying to get a sense of, is this someone that can get along with other people? Can they get results? Can they finish things? Can they work independently? Or are they going to be in my office complaining and starting fights with people all the time? So you never want to come across negatively in an interview. Qualifications questions. So how I recommend preparing for these, go through that job description and highlight all of the skills that they seem to be looking for. You might identify 10 skills, for example. So let's say it was a writing position. And so they're talking about AP style, and they're talking about editing, and they're talking about creating advertisements and writing articles and working with reporters. So each of those things you would highlight, and you would want to make sure that you formulate a question for each one. So the question might be, what's your comfort level with AP style and following a format like that? So whatever the situation is for you, go through the job description meticulously and make sure that you can speak to each of the skills, especially areas of weakness. If there's a skill that they're asking for and you don't have it, that doesn't mean you can't apply for the job, but think about how you're going to address it. So maybe you say, so far to date, I haven't been a direct supervisor for another employee, but I've really done a lot of project management and I've trained a lot of employees, and I'm very confident in my ability to work well with people and to move into that leadership role. So think about if there's those areas of weakness, how you're going to talk about them instead as areas of learning. So A lot of people are good at this kind of stuff, coming up with what to say, but how to structure it can really trip them up, or when to stop talking. A lot of people trail off and they'll end their answer with something like, "So yeah," or "Is that good?" And you really don't want to do that. You want to be confident, and you want there to be a start and a stop and a rhythm to your answers. So this is kind of how I think of it, if it's helpful, imposing some sort of structure. And I think someone asks you a question, you confirm your ability to do whatever they've asked, whether you can do that thing. Then you can prove it with an example, and then come back and summarize that, or just say kind of yes again. So it's kind of like yes, for example, yes. So as an example, Benton County citizens come from a lot of backgrounds with different concerns and personalities. Will you be able to meet this challenge? So the person says, yes, I feel very comfortable working with community members. Here comes the example. While doing a public relations internship, I answered phone calls for local and national reporters and wrote audience-appropriate statements for diverse groups like parents and senior citizens for 2 PR campaigns. So, I feel confident I could communicate well with the citizens of Benton County. This summary statement, that last sentence, is the part that most people struggle with. So, you've answered their question, you've come up with some sort of example, so how do you stop talking? How do you land your plane? A lot of times the word "so" can really help. So you say, "So, I feel very comfortable doing that for you. So, I know that I could bring that to your company. So, I have a lot of experience in that area." And that's how you stop. You kind of drop your voice and you stop talking. This is a great skill to practice if you're a rambler. So, day of the interview, the next portion. So, we've prepared. How are we going to move forward and make a good impression? So, how do you dress? What is the difference between business professional and business casual? So business professional, as you can see, it's typically your suit. So you're going to be wearing the same colors, on the top and the bottom, blacks, grays, tans. There tend to be more neutral colors. You want to be pretty conservative, usually long sleeves, longer skirts, closed-toed shoes, and obviously getting away from things like tennis shoes and ripped things, and it's very professional. It's very formal. This is pretty common in certain industries. If you're in business, for example, accounting, law, you might be wearing these suits in your interview, but not all fields are like this. So if you do need a suit for your field, and a good way to check is to just talk to people in the field, talk to professors, talk to people who work at the company that you're interested in, and how do they dress. But suits can be expensive. And I remember buying my first suit when I graduated from college, and it was a big expense for me. And I actually don't really buy suits anymore. I have a trick. So instead of buying, if you buy a suit together, you buy the top portion and the bottom portion and the shirt and the tie or whatever, and it all comes as a set. A lot of times that's going to cost you several $100s. But if you can buy the pieces separately, that can be a lot cheaper. So these days, I might buy some sort of business dress and a blazer that goes with it. And then you got what looks like a suit, but it's not sold as a suit. Or if you do black, you can buy a black blazer and black slacks separately, so long as they're the same color black. And then you buy whatever shirt, or you already have a shirt that goes under it, and hey, there you go, you got a suit. If you don't buy it as a set, sometimes it's cheaper. Other tips for acquiring cheaper suits, you can look at consignment stores, Goodwills, things like that. And then there's also on campus, and there might be something in your area if you're not local to Corvallis. We have something called Benny's Closet, which is greatly discounted business clothes. So a lot of times there are clubs at colleges that do that kind of thing, and they just do occasional or weekly shopping sessions where you can get greatly discounted professional clothes. So a few more principles. It's a good idea to cover tattoos, takeout, piercings, potentially. It really depends on the industry and who you're interviewing with, but these are just kind of some of the more conservative standards. And if you're debating on whether to go more conservative or not, it's probably better to go a little more conservative because you never know who you're going to be interviewing with and their personal preferences, and you don't want to freak somebody out. So business casual. A lot of times this might be what you're wearing to work on a day-to-day basis, but depending on the industry, you might actually be interviewing in business casual. So it tends to be some of the same elements as a suit, but maybe you're not wearing a tie, or maybe you're wearing a dress and a sweater instead of a blazer. And it's just a little bit more casual, but you're still going to want to avoid tennis shoes and flip-flops, and you're going to want to make sure that your hair is clean and all the things, all the hygiene things, and everything matches and is coordinated. So just think about that depending on your industry. And I also have a slide in here for agriculture specific or for outdoor jobs, or it could be academic jobs, for example. Certain fields dress more casually than others. And so, for example, my husband is a horticultural researcher, and it always struck me as so odd as a business person that he would go off to an interview wearing like khakis and like brown leather shoes and maybe just a button up but no tie, and it wasn't the normal shiny black and silver kind of fabrics that I'm used to. It's very kind of earthy looking, and basically he's doing what the rule is, which is you dress a little bit nicer than the people dress in the job that they're doing. So the people in the job are wearing tennis shoes and jeans. Wearing khakis is a step up, and that's a good interview. And he was telling me that he had a student because he hires student workers, and she showed up just like dressed to the nines for her interview. Just in a suit and with perfume on. And, his bias was in seeing her, can she do an outdoor job? I don't know. And he was debating whether or not he wanted to hire her because he wasn't sure if she would fit in agriculture. It turned out she was one of the best workers he ever had. She just didn't have an understanding of the conventions of the field. So if you're not sure how to dress for that field, find someone that you trust in the field, or a professor or somebody like that, and ask them how would they recommend dressing for an interview. Because it's just so variable field to field. But if you are going for like an outdoor job, these are some ideas of what you could wear. For example, females might want to wear pants instead of like heels and a suit, because if you're going to get dirty, you want to show that, you're going to wear flat shoes, you wear pants. It just conveys that you can work outside. You might want to consider khakis. You might want to consider a button-up shirt. Whether or not you wear a tie and the patterns on that tie would probably depend on what you're interviewing for. Just some things to consider. Okay, let's talk about body language. This is one of my favorite quotes from The Little Mermaid. And don't underestimate the importance of the body language. That's obviously, Ursula the sea monster. If you're not well schooled in The Little Mermaid, which you definitely should be if you're not. So, but Ursula had it right. So much of interviewing is body language. And for some people, this is just really easy. This comes to them really naturally. But for some people, this is harder. And like making eye contact is hard, or you just don't feel socially comfortable. So if that's your case, I would recommend practicing this with someone that you trust. Ask them really honest questions. So when you go up and you give them a handshake, let's say it's your roommate. Say, what's my posture like? How am I coming across? And they might say, you know what? You need to smile a lot more, or you need to look at me more. And then practice that in front of a mirror, whatever you need to do, because we all have our strengths and weaknesses. So if the body language thing is hard for you, just spend some time practicing it and ask some real questions of people in your life about how you're coming across. But general principles, you want to make good eye contact. You want to be present and positive and smiling. I've definitely interviewed people who are looking out the window, and that conveys to me that they're disinterested. Or people that just seemed so nervous because they're just kind of like shaking all over. I mean, we can only do so much with our nerves, but as best you can, fake confidence, sit up straight and smile, use as calm of a tone of voice as you can. The more relaxed that you seem, the more relaxed the employer is going to seem. And then the verbal things as well. If you're using like a lot or a lot, practice those kinds of things. This comes out a lot, I think, in my generation and younger. you start to tell stories and you say, and she was like, and he was like, and they were like. So if you find yourself doing that a lot, try to trim out your likes as much as you can, because that can come across a little unprofessional. Okay, a few more interviewing tips. What if it's a phone interview? Very frequently it will be. A lot of times companies start with a phone interview to interview more candidates quickly, and then they bring in their top candidates in person. So how can you make a phone interview work for you? The first thing is you can have cheat sheet stuff in front of you. Have your resume in front of you. If you've gone through and done a question prep, have some bullet points in front of you, because you can actually make it work to your advantage to be able to see your notes and remember those Telus Story questions. Maybe you write down a biology project, that went awry or something like that. And that jogs your memory, like, oh, okay, I was going to tell them about this solution I came up with in my laboratory. Test out all the ambiance things. Do you have a quiet spot with good cell reception? You got to test that. You want to smile on the phone because it comes out in your tone of voice. And then this is important. Make sure that you have a contact name and phone number in case something goes wrong. So it could be something as simple as their meeting runs over or they get stuck in traffic and you're sitting there waiting for them to call you and freaking out. You want to have information so you could say, hey, I had a phone appointment at 9 o'clock. It's about 9:05. I wanted to check in and make sure everything's okay, because you don't want it to seem like you've done something wrong if there was a miscommunication. So make sure that you have your backups handy. Tips for video interviewing. This is happening more often with remote workers. So if you want to practice a video interview, the Career Development Center has a tool called Standout. So again, this is at career.oregonstate.edu. And so for Standout, you can record yourself answering questions and see how are you coming across. How's that body language working? How are your questions coming across? And Standout will assign you a comprehensibility score. So if you're mumbling a lot, if you're hard to understand for whatever reason, it might give you a lower score. And then you can say, oh, I need to work on that. So it's a really good tool for that. Additionally, as you're getting ready for your video interview, think about the background. What are they going to see behind you? If it's a messy house, does that give a bad impression? Or if it's your dorm room bed, does that give a weird impression? Maybe you need to set up a new spot, step into a conference room or a study room of some kind, or an office that will look a little bit more professional. You want the camera to be looking at you straight on, so you don't want it to be coming at you from below or above, or like holding your phone out. If you can avoid doing the FaceTime interview, I think that's a little unprofessional. What's better is if you can set up a laptop, but do what you got to do based on the technology you have, and then make sure to look at the camera, so the person on the other side, and not at the image of yourself. So just some things to consider and practice in advance. And then don't forget to follow up. So this is a Anchorman quote, if you weren't aware. Stay classy, San Diego. So this is one of those really nice things that is getting a little bit lost in our culture, and that's just saying thank you for interviews. So that could be a handwritten thank you note. It could be an email, but most candidates don't say thank you for the opportunity. And in addition to it just being polite to say thank you, this is another way for you to stay in the employer's mind. So as they're going through and thinking about the candidates they just talked to, if you're one of only a couple that sent a thank you, then that really reflects positively on you. Think about doing that thank you. And the other thing I like to add is that it's okay to check back in and follow up with the employer after an interview. Sometimes employers, things happen, they're just getting busy, or they picked another candidate and they don't let you know. And it's totally fine to call them up and just say, hey, I just wanted to check in on the status of interviews and just let you know that I'm still really interested in this position. That is totally fine to do. So, and I would encourage you to stay on their radar. And that's all she wrote. So those are some tips for practicing interviews, but I would just leave this with my main feedback is spend time thinking about the interview questions in advance and preparing for them, and then run through your interview, hopefully multiple times, with people that can give you good feedback, whether that's a career advisor like me that you can access through a handshake, or whether it's a friend that you could run through your interview with. So best of luck interviewing. I hope you nail those interviews and get great jobs.